The countdown to the August primary is on. Floridians preparing to voice their choice for governor. Tonight, the Democratic candidates face off in their second gubernatorial debate. Nearly 2 decades since Florida last had a Democratic governor. Could 2018 be their year? Decision 2018. The Democratic debate is brought to you live by Spectrum News in proud partnership with Indivisible Florida 13, Fired Up Pinellas, and Women's March Florida. Here now are tonight's moderators.
Good evening, everyone, to our audience with us here tonight and to our viewers tuning in all across the state of Florida. Thank you so much for joining us. We are coming to you live tonight from Pinellas Park High School. We want to welcome you to Decision 2018, the Democratic debate for governor. I'm Spectrum Bay News 9 anchor Holly Gregory. I'll be one of 3 moderators for this evening's debate.
I'm Tammy Fields from Spectrum News 13 Orlando. So glad to be here with you. The debate tonight again brought to you by Indivisible Florida 13, Fired Up Pinellas, Women's March Florida, and Spectrum News.
And I'm Adam Smith, the political editor of the Tampa Bay Times. Let's introduce our 4 candidates. We have, going from left to right, Andrew Gillum, Chris King, Philip Levine, and Gwen Graham. Thanks for being here. There's a 5th candidate who's also announced, Jeff Green, but he declined to participate tonight.
All right, we do quickly first want to go over the debate rules. We're going to be asking you questions, of course, addressing issues very important to our state. Some of those questions will come from us, the moderators. We also have students in our audience. We are at a high school tonight. They'll be asking you questions as well, and then some of our questions coming via social media.
Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond, and if one of the other candidates feels they want to rebut or react to that, you'll have 30 seconds. We will be fairly ruthless in cutting you off if you go over.
So let's get right to it. Our candidates will now give their 1-minute opening remarks, and the order was drawn numerically at random. We're going to move from left to right, starting off with Andrew Gillum. You now have 1 minute to begin your opening remark. Please go ahead.
Great. Thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. My name is Andrew Gillum, and I'm standing up here as a candidate for governor for anybody who has ever been told that they don't belong. Although I'm the mayor of Tallahassee, Florida, I'm actually from Miami-Dade. Raised there by my mother, Frances, who was a school bus driver, and my daddy, Charles, who was a construction worker. I'm the 5th of 7 kids and the first of my siblings to graduate from high school and the first to graduate from college. To have my little brother and my little sister come behind me and do the same thing, you can't tell anybody in our family we don't know what it means to see intergenerational poverty interrupted at the hands of a good public education. I'm running for governor as a progressive because I believe that we can win this state by standing for who we are, what we believe in, giving voters a reason to turn out and vote for something, not just against something. If we do that, not only will we win this state in 2018 and flip Florida blue, we're going to flip this country blue in 2020, and I'd love to be the governor to get us there.
Thanks, Mr. Gillum. Hey, we have a lot to go through, so let's try to keep the applause minimum so we can get as much in. Mr. King, you're next.
Good evening. I'm running for governor because I'm not satisfied. I'm alarmed. Florida has big challenges and small politics. I am a progressive entrepreneur. I'm a lifelong Democrat. I started an affordable housing company from scratch the right way, a company that paid living wages of $15 and up, full health care, full bonuses. That might not be a typical business, but I learned early you can do well by doing good. So I launched a different type of campaign, one that said if we're going to tackle our big problems, we can't resort to conventional politics. So I've advanced new ideas, like dismantling the school-to-prison pipeline, taking on the sugar industry for the benefit of our environment, and rattling the cage of the NRA with an assault weapons ban and a bullet tax. If we're going to lift up families across the state of Florida, we have to transform Tallahassee. That's why I'm running. That's what I want to do as serving as your governor.
Thank you, Mr. King. Mr. Levine, you're up next.
Thank you. A few weeks ago, a couple of hundred students from this wonderful high school, Pinellas Park, graduated high school. A lot of them went to an uncertain future, different than what their parents and grandparents had. I started with $500. I had a single mom. I'm the second person in my entire family to graduate college. I built a company, and I became mayor. I'm running for governor because I believe in the American dream. And I want to make sure everyone has the opportunity, and I'm running to level the playing field. Estoy postulando para ser gobernador porque yo quiero que toda la gente en nuestro estado tiene la oportunidad como yo. I'm running to make sure everyone has the opportunity to live the American dream in our state. We're going to do it by investing in education, having health care for everybody, and making history by passing the ERA amendment so women have equal pay for equal work in the state of Florida going forward. That's why I'm running for governor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Levine. And now, Gwen Graham, your turn.
Thank you. Thank you to all the viewers at home. Thank you to the moderators. But mostly thank you to the students, because this election is about you. The state of Florida has been under one-party rule for 20 years, and we have run out of time. I want you to have a bright future. I want you to have the future that I was so fortunate to see in my path as I was raised in Florida, born in South Florida in Miami, and moved to Tallahassee when my father, Governor Bob Graham, was elected when I was 15 years old. But that future has been under attack. We have not been supporting our public schools. There has been an all-out attack on our public schools. I am so honored to have received the endorsement of the Florida Education Association just this week. And I'm going to be fighting for our public schools, fighting for our environment, fighting to make sure that every Floridian in Florida can get that great paying job, fighting for quality health care. That's why I'm running. That's the governor I'm committed to being. I will work for you every single day.
Your time is up, Ms.
Thank
Graham.
you.
Thank you very much. We don't have a lot of time, so we'd like to jump right in and get to our first question.
And that first question is going to come from one of our students here tonight. This is from Taylor Harris. He's 11 years old. He's a 7th grader at Thurgood Marshall Fundamental School in St. Petersburg. And Taylor, if you want to step up to the microphone and ask the candidates your first question, you go right ahead.
What have you done? What are you planning to do to keep me safe in my current school from gun violence and school shootings? I don't attend an Ivy League school. I attend a local school with Title I funding. I want to be safe and not scared at school.
All right, Taylor. Thank you so much, Taylor. We're going to put that question to you first, Mr. Levine. You may be aware that the very building we're standing in here at Pinellas Park High School still has a bullet hole in the wall from a fatal school shooting 30 years ago. Of course, we all know the more recent tragedies as well. And then within the last 24 hours, also coming to light that evidently in our state, at least a few hundred people were able to get their concealed weapons permits without proper background checks. In light of that framework, how would you answer Taylor's question about keeping him and all of our students safe in their schools?
Thank you, and thank you, Taylor, for that question. As I address this question, I want to look and talk to the parents who lost kids at Marjorie Douglas Stoneman. I can tell you this, if I'm honored to be governor, I will make sure we ban assault rifles. We will make sure we have better background checks. We will make sure that those with mental health issues will not be able to buy guns in Florida. But also, what I propose to do, Taylor, is create an Education Security Administration, an ESA. You know, when you go to the airport, you have a TSA. We're going to begin an ESA in the state of Florida, and we are going to make our schools safe in this state because this is something that's gone on too long, and it's shameful and it's horrible. As the mayor of Miami Beach, we banned assault rifles. When this horrible tragedy happened, we led an incredible rally up to Tallahassee, and we did it with the Women's March. 25 buses from all over the state. So I can promise you this, and look at you and look to the parents who lost children. As governor, we will get rid of these weapons in our state.
Your 1 minute is up, sir. Thank you. Mr. Gillum, I saw you taking notes. You would have 30 seconds to respond if you like.
Well, just to the point, hopefully this is to the question or to Mr. Levine's comments?
To the question, please.
To the question. Let me just be very clear. First of all, Taylor, it breaks my heart that has to be a question that an 11-year-old will ask. And it also breaks my heart to think about what your parents have to consider when they send you off to school. No parent should ever have to fear that their kids will come home in a body bag when you send them off to get an education in this state. And I'll tell you one thing about me. I fought the NRA in the gun lobby, and I've won not once but twice. We beat them when they sued us, and we'll beat them again when we're made governor here of the great state of Florida.
Time is up, sir. Thank you.
Next question here. Mr. King, you have the most ambitious proposal. A 6% sales tax on bullets. If elected governor, how in the world do you expect to pass this through GOP majority-led legislation? You have a minute to respond.
Thank you. You know, I think there were probably a lot of people across the state of Florida that could never have imagined that we would have passed the school safety bill that we passed this year. One of the first attempts to combat gun violence we've seen in decades in Florida. It wasn't perfect, it was unfinished, it did much, it left much undone. But the reason we did that is because of the courage from the students from Parkland. I would argue we're standing on their shoulders. And so when people say, Chris, is it possible? How are you going to do that? How are you going to pass a bullet tax, which would create a revenue source to invest in the types of ideas and technologies that are about keeping Taylor safe and keeping Taylor's friends safe? How are you going to do it? We have to elect a Democratic governor who's going to transform politics. That's what makes me different. I am willing to propose these bold ideas, and I'm willing to change the arguments in Tallahassee to make them happen.
Thank you. Your time is up there. Appreciate it, Mr. King. Ms. Graham, what do you think about this proposal, and do you think it's realistic?
I think what the students across the state of Florida and across the country want at this point is action, not just words. And Taylor, I want to say how sorry I am as a mom that you have to face this fear every day going to school. So my commitment to you is action, not words. I have found a public safety statute that allows the governor, whoever she may be, to sign an executive order for public safety reasons, banning the sale of military-style assault weapons. That's what I'm going to do for you, Taylor, and all students across the state of Florida.
Let's move on to a topic that's related to gun safety. Mr. Gillum, you and I think everybody else on the stage is a big supporter of the ballot initiative that would restore voting rights to felons who've completed their sentences. That initiative would also restore voting rights to people who'd committed violent crimes, armed robbery, carjacking, domestic abuse. Are you comfortable with those sorts of violent offenders getting their restoration back?
Let me tell you, what I'm comfortable with is that if you commit a crime and you've done your time, after you're released back into society, you ought to have the dignity that comes with the right to vote. Not only that, but as mayor of the city of Tallahassee, I banned the box. We don't ask about criminal background history when you apply for a job in my city unless answering yes to having had one is a disqualifier for the job. If it is not, we're going to measure you on your merit. Are you qualified? Will you contribute to our organization? And if the answer is yes, welcome aboard. And what we have learned is that those employees happen to be some of the hardest working people we have. Why, y'all? Because they know what it means to be without. In this country, we say you cannot be charged twice for the same crime. But it seems that you can be punished perpetually for a mistake. That's wrong, and we got to pass Amendment 4 and restore rights to nearly 1 million of the most vigorous individuals who we want returned to our society.
Mr. Levine, what about you? Armed carjackers, domestic abusers, they should have their rights automatically restored?
What I believe is this. We are a nation and a state of second chances. People come from all over the world to come to America, and people come for second chances in Florida. I believe if someone has paid their debt to society, that they should be given the opportunity to become a productive member of society, and that means being able to vote. But with that said, there may be certain crimes, like murder and rape, where they may not be able to get their rights restored.
Mr. King, let's talk about the state of our economy here in the state of Florida. Florida has the lowest unemployment rate in years. Governor Scott often speaks about jobs, job creation, and delivering on his promise. More people are coming to this state every single day. All of this under Republican leadership. Why do you think people need to make a change now?
Well, Tammy, I think that because 1 out of every 2 of those jobs that Governor Scott talks about pays less than $15 an hour. Of the 10 most populated states in America, we are last in wages, incomes, and per capita GDP. We have an affordable housing crisis that Governor Scott doesn't talk about. We have 2.5 million people without access to a doctor who knows their name that Governor Scott does not talk about. There are children across this state that don't have pathways of opportunity to college or community college or trade school. What I would argue is that Governor Scott And the one-party state government in Tallahassee has done a great job at representing the wealthy and well-connected. We want to represent everybody else. And this is a time that a Democratic governor could make this economy work for more families. That's why I'm running. That's why I'm doing this.
Thank you, Mr. King.
And our next question is going to come from another student with us tonight. This is Audrey Villahong. She's 18 years old. She graduated from Gulf High School in Newport Richey, plans to attend UF this fall. So Audrey, if you want to walk up to the mic and address the candidates, please ask them your question. Go ahead.
Hi, my question is kind of like a few questions in one. So how do you plan to address the increasing movement towards charter and private schools in our state? What are your stances on state funding going to charter schools, and what are you willing to do to help failing schools succeed again? And please be as specific as possible with your opinions.
All right. Mr. Gillum, we're going to put that question over to you. Now, you have been critical of funding for charter schools, yet we know that enrollment in these schools continues to grow each year. Many of those families are looking and finding success in charter schools when they had failing schools in their own neighborhoods. But would you specifically try to change the new law that mandates sharing property taxes with charter schools and also creating the schools of hope for struggling neighborhoods? How would you answer this in 1 minute?
Sure. Well, we should also be clear that many of those charter schools are said to not perform any better than many of the schools that they're standing up to be replace. What we've got to do is end this for-profit regime that the Republicans have entered into the public education system here in the state of Florida. We've got to do it immediately. We also have to begin to strip through our K through 12 system, our system of these high-stakes tests, which don't tell us what our kids know, but how well they take a test. We also ought to pay teachers what they are worth, unleash them to unleash their talent to do exactly what they were hired to do, which is to teach. I also believe that we've got to re-infuse into our public education system the kind of training that used to exist. If you were not on your way to college, you got access to woodwork, shop, mechanical, electrical, technical, all of those programs that would give you a skill that you could monetize, go to work, get a job, and earn a livable wage. That's what we've got to do to transform this state and make that public system public again. I would be completely against for-profit charters in this state.
And Ms. Graham, you this week were endorsed by the Florida Education Association, so I'd like to give you a chance to answer our students' question tonight as well.
Well, and thank you. As a former PTA mom, a band mom, I was housed in the band room earlier. It felt very comfortable to me. And having worked in the public schools for 7 years, I understand what has happened to public education. There has been a concerted attempt to privatize our public schools, and my commitment to public schools, it is without question, we are going to end the for-profit charter schools that have taken over our school districts. We're going to make sure that we're funding our teachers as they deserve to be paid. They are heroes, my heroes. We're going to make sure that not only are we ending the high-stakes standardized culture, but we're bringing back a joy of learning with art and music. Public education is my #1 priority. It is the backbone of our economy, and we're going to get it back to where it needs to be for all the students and for our state.
I want you to weigh in on this as well, because you have talked about private charter operators saying that it is like investing in someone else's business. But charter schools are public schools, sir, so how would you defund them? Can you clarify your position? What would you do with these students, those who do find success in these schools?
Absolutely. What I plan to do, if I'm honored to be governor, #1 is we're going to pay our teachers $10,000 more and bring them up to the national average. That's #1. #2, we are going to stop investing in someone else's business because those are for-profit charter schools. We need to invest in our public schools, the schools that we need to make best in the country so we can become a 21st century economy. Everyone talks about great jobs. I come from a state called Massachusetts. They have the best education in the world, and that's the reason why they have the highest paying jobs. As governor, we will invest in our education system.
Thank you. We're going to switch gears. This goes to Mr. Gillum. There's currently an FBI corruption investigation hanging over you and Tallahassee City Hall. Revelations have come out recently that you took a vacation, lavish vacation to Costa Rica, along with lobbyists for lobbying the city. You apparently paid for your $1,400 hotel room with cash. Why would Democrats want to nominate someone who's so vulnerable to attack and has so much baggage as you seem to?
Yeah, well, those are a lot of word salad, and a lot to debunk there. But let me begin by saying I have a zero tolerance for corruption. I have been elected for 15 years by doing right, not by doing wrong. I realize that there are some people that would like to criminalize every relationship that I have. But what I have said is to judge me by my actions, judge me by my deeds, judge me by my service, my ethics, my reputation, and I take that all very, very seriously. I have friends on many sides of the aisle. Some are lobbyists. Many of them I've known for 20 plus years, and it doesn't to me matter who they are or where they come from. It is my position that if when I go and vote, and when I vote on an issue, I always vote my conscience, whether you are for that issue or against that issue. And you won't find a place in my record that would dispute that. The FBI investigation in my community seems to be focused on an individual and on a realm of folks in that area, and not on me, and there has been no evidence to connect me to anything wrongdoing or illegal.
Mr. King, how would you respond to that? Should Democrats be concerned about nominating somebody with some of this going on?
Well, you know, Adam, I have gotten to know Andrew Gillum over the last year pretty well. I probably spent more time with Andrew than my wife on some weekends.
Clarify that.
I know. and I know. You're not nearly as cute, I promise you. And I can tell you, Andrew is a good and noble public servant. And I think Democrats are going to be looking at the character and integrity of their candidate. I think there are 4 candidates up here that are going to give them some great choices. But I think we're going to present a pretty powerful candidate this November.
All right, Ms. Graham, we're going to switch gears here to medical marijuana. As you know, it was just very recently that a judge in Tallahassee ruled that the state overstepped its constitutional boundaries by banning smoke. They now have a very, very tight timetable under this order to implement that. One of the criticisms all along from medical marijuana patients is they feel that the state has been dragging its feet on implementing their care. How would you do things differently? How would you get access to patients?
When I'm governor and when the people of Florida speak loudly, I'm going to listen to them. And the people of Florida spoke loudly that they want medical marijuana implemented. And we are going to make sure that not only with medical marijuana, but the lottery dollars, funds for our environment, funds to hold polluters accountable. These are all constitutional amendments that the legislature and the governor have ignored. I believe in medical marijuana. My husband is sitting in the audience who, a couple years ago, we found out that he had stage 4 prostate cancer. Being able to take advantage of medical marijuana would have alleviated some of his pain from chemo. I want to make sure that all Floridians across the state of Florida can take advantage of the benefits of medical marijuana. Anytime there's an opportunity to alleviate pain, I'm a mom, I want to do that. And I want to make sure that the will of the people of Florida is followed, and I will do that as governor.
Thank you, Ms. Graham. Mr. King, I want to follow up on the topic of marijuana. What do you think about recreational marijuana for our state and the tax dollars it could bring in? Is that something you'd be in favor of?
100%. Well, first of all, let me just say this. Medical marijuana was approved 2 years ago by the people. Today, people still can't get it in the state of Florida. And the reason is, let me tell you the reason, is because the Kremlin, Tallahassee, doesn't want to listen to the people of Florida. They did it with Forever Florida. They did it with the minimum living wage. Now they do it with medical marijuana. To answer your question, I am in favor of legalization of marijuana in the state of Florida. We're going to regulate it, we're going to tax it, and you're going to have to be over 21 to make sure. But also, we're going to let the local communities decide specific laws the way it should be.
Mr. Levine, thank you. Now, Mr. King, I'd like you to weigh in on that as well. I know you've come out in support of recreational.
Yes, you know, last month I came out with a criminal justice plan. And for me, the legalization of marijuana and taxing it and regulating it ultimately was somewhere I got because I saw how unfair our laws were. You know, we're in Pinellas County tonight. In Pinellas County, if you are black, you are 6 times more likely to be arrested for the use of marijuana than if you are white. That is wrong. We've got to fix it. I'm determined to do just that.
feel like we should go right on down the line. Mr. Gillum, please weigh in on
Well,
medical
I may be the last to
recreational.
speak up on this, but I was the first to be in favor of legalizing it, taxing it, regulating it, and taking those revenues and putting them back into the public education system. Chris is exactly right. The stats that I saw is that whites and blacks use marijuana at about the same rate, yet blacks are 4 times as likely to be arrested, criminalized, prosecuted, and jailed. We've got to disrupt this criminal justice pipeline. We began by legalizing it, and we take those proceeds and we invest it in paying teachers and other support staff what they are deserving of to educate our kids and do the most important work that exists on earth.
Time is up, sir.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Our next question is from a student. This student named Cammie Donald, 17 years old, from Countryside High School in Clearwater. Step up to the podium if you would and ask your question.
Hi. Given the recent tumultuous political climate, what will you specifically do to prevent police brutality in regards to targeted shooting towards people of color?
And Mr. King, we'd like you to take that question, please.
Yes. I appreciate the question. We have seen this issue all across the country. We've seen it across Florida. And I have spoken with parents who are terrified, particularly in communities of color, about what it might look like for their young son. And so I think, first and foremost, I have a respect for law enforcement. And most of the people who wear the badge are wonderful and doing incredible and life-saving work. But when there are mistakes that are made, when harassment in communities is demonstrated, we need a governor who can raise the red flag, a governor who can say this is not fair, and a governor who will make sure that these incidents are looked at transparently and people are held accountable. And I believe when we have that type of governor, we can solve this issue and we can fix it, and I'm determined to be that.
Our next question is from Facebook. We had a lot of people who went in and wanted to be a part of this debate tonight, so one of these questions is from them. Do you see institutionalized racism as a threat to our democracy, and why? This question will go to Mr. Gillum first.
Why is that? I had to. It was an opening. I'm sorry.
You have 1 minute, Mr. Gillum.
But I will tell you that we know that our society is deserving of greater cultural competency when it comes to dealing with diverse communities. We know that different people interpret threats very differently. We can look no further than the situation between Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman. George Zimmerman was able to interpret the very presence of Trayvon Martin to present a threat. And because of stand your ground laws, which have no place in civilized society, he was able to engage him, snuff out his life, and get away with it. We've got to return some balance to this conversation. And the truth is whether it be police brutality, and I recognize that these are individuals who have very difficult jobs that they have to do. I salute them for doing that. But when there are bad actors and bad players, we have got to weed them out of the system. And in fact, they ought to be the first ones calling for those folks to be weed out of the system and not waiting for elected officials like myself in order to do that. We've got a lot of work to do, but I feel like we're making progress.
Your time is up. Thank you
Indeed.
very much. Ms. Graham, I know you wanted to jump in and answer as well.
Sorry, they were clapping.
No problem. Would you like to rebut?
Yeah, we have serious problems in our communities where the divisiveness and the negativity and the ugliness that we see amongst race, amongst gender, amongst LGBTQ members of the LGBTQ community, we have all got to start caring about each other more and respecting each other more. And I believe the law enforcement side of this, we need to have a lot more community policing, where the police officers become members of the communities and know the men and women that they're tasked with serving. And I think that type of sensitivity training will go a long way.
Mr. Levine, you wanted to rebut?
The issue with politicians today is people say things a lot of times that they've ever actually done before in their lives. When I became mayor, a few months before, an African-American male was shot 100 and something times in his car during Memorial Day weekend. I said, if I become mayor, I'll reform a police department. And that's what I did. I put in a new chief, a deputy chief, an African-American woman, the highest ranking in the history of our city. We changed captains, we changed majors, we put cameras on our police before Ferguson. So it's important for people to say, have you done it before? I did it as a mayor of Miami Beach, and I can tell you when you do it, you do not get the police endorsement.
I just want to...
I think...
I have two people here who'd like to speak on that. Can we start with you, Mr. King?
Sure. I think this is one of the issues I'm most passionate about. When you say, do we have institutionalized racism in Florida, and is it shown in the policies and the laws of this state, I would say yes. And I think the power of a governor is standing up sometimes when they're unpopular causes because certain communities are treated differently than others. You know, take Confederate monuments. I believe I was one of the strongest voices that stood up and said they all must come down. Take the death penalty. Take the death penalty. I am the only one on this stage that opposes it outright, and one of the biggest reasons is it's because disproportionately it's been used against communities of color.
Your time is up. Thank you.
All right, switching gears now, we're going to go over to Ms. Graham. Democrats have been appalled this year by the treatment of refugees by the Trump administration. During your time in Congress, you voted for the SAFE Act, which stands for Security Against Foreign Enemies Act. President Obama was against it. It did not pass the Senate. Now, PolitiFact determined that if it had passed, it wouldn't have stopped Syrian refugees from coming into our country, but it would have created significant barriers and drastically reduced the numbers of Syrians coming in. Did your vote in Congress at the time reflect the more conservative views of your northern Florida district, or do you believe that Syrian refugees pose a threat to our country?
I am the granddaughter of a Syrian Lebanese refugee, and I know that our state must remain a welcoming state for all those that wish to immigrate into our country and hopefully into Florida. That piece of legislation is very misunderstood, and I was very glad to see PolitiFact identify correctly that it was not a ban on Syrian refugees. It was purely to certify the process that is already in place. And I would argue that we would be in a much better place today if that piece of legislation had passed than what we have with Donald J. Trump doing to our country and standing in the way of immigrants coming into the United States of America. We must be a welcoming country, and that piece of legislation would have put in place the Obama process for refugees, and I think we would be in a better place today if it had been voted in.
Thank you. Mr. King, you'd like to rebut?
Holly, that's simply not true. If that bill would have passed, which it didn't, because we had a president in place, President Barack Obama, who would have said no, but had that passed, it would have made it nearly impossible. Maybe it wasn't a ban, but it would have made it nearly impossible. Look, the Syrian refugee crisis is one of the greatest refugee crises in recent memory. On the very day that the Congress purported to take that vote, I wrote an editorial which said this is the moment where leaders have to stand up, defend American values for these communities. I think that is an important part of being the next governor of Florida.
I have to say, Mr. King, you were not there during the discussions. I was there in the Democratic House caucus, and we had discussions about this bill. It was a certification bill, and I even talked to the chief of staff of the White House, and I said, I tell you what, I will buy you the stamp that allows you to certify that all of the departments across the country that are responsible for immigration are doing their job today. And if they are, this would add no more time to the process. I was there during the discussions.
We have two that want to rebut, and I will give you a chance, but first, a direct response. Mr. King, go ahead.
Yes. What my point is, she was there, but it didn't matter. Look, the most important job for a governor is to stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves. And that is why we run for this office. That is why we make the sacrifices we make, because there are people out there, there are Syrian refugee families that are depending on the United States of America to stand up and protect them.
Mr. Gillum, I know you're waiting, and I will get to you in just a moment, but I will give you your final chance to respond
Mr. King, again, If that bill had been in place, what we face today with this President of the United States, barring the entry of Syrian refugees, we would have had a process and law in place. And every single vote that I cast was based on an informed position. And this bill was a bill that would have certified the process that was in place. It became politicized. I believe you do what's right every single time, and I always will.
Mr. Gillum, your turn.
I will simply say that no one is more informed or could have been more prepared and more responsible than the President of the United States, who opposed this legislation. Barack Obama opposed it. Rick Scott joined in and said Syrian refugees were not welcomed in the state of Florida. And I stood up as the mayor of Florida's capital city and said that they are welcome in the city of Tallahassee. And we relocated many families. I simply have to say this because this is an important leadership moment. The Republicans flew this as a red herring, as a way to divide and to keep us in fear. That was their tactic. The difference is that we need leaders who are not just going to be thermometers, but will be thermostats and set the temperature, not just tell it.
Let's move on. Mr. Levine, we're obviously running here for the Democratic nomination for governor. A lot of the people in the audience will attest to the progressive wing in the party being more energized than ever before in Florida, or at least in decades. When you started looking at running for governor, you talked about not even running as a Democrat, but running as a third-party candidate. And the last time we had a competitive U.S. Senate race, you gave your $2,400 check not to Democrat Kendrick Meek, not to moderate Governor Charlie Crist, but to very conservative Marco Rubio. What do you say to the Democrats who might be conservative?
Thank you for the question. So for many years, I have contributed, literally, I think at this point personally, upwards of $1 million to Democrats. That's number one. Number two, I spent over a year and a half of my life trying to elect the first female president of the United States, Secretary Clinton, okay? And unfortunately, we were not successful. I think I was her number one surrogate on television all over the place. But let me tell you what I stand for, because you know what happens with politics? Everyone wants to tell you what they're going to do in the future, but no one wants to tell you what they've done. Well, let me tell you what I've done as mayor. I raised the minimum living wage in the city of Miami Beach, and I plan to do it statewide. We actually decriminalized marijuana. We've had the highest LGBTQ scores in the entire state of Florida. We became the leading poster child on sea level rise and climate change. And by the way, we banned assault rifles. So the question is, am I a Democrat? I am a Democrat. I'm proud to be a Democrat. But if I'm honored to be governor, what I'm not going to do is separate people. I'm going to bring people together in the state of Florida.
Couple hands here, starting with Mr. Gillum.
Well, I'll just have to say, Marco Rubio is anti-immigrant. He is anti-DREAM Act. He was anti-healthcare. He is a bad Republican. He was undeserving. He was undeserving of any Democrat's support whatsoever. The mayor referred to his contribution as de minimis, throwaway. The mayor's contribution represents what many people pay in their mortgage or in their rent over a number of months. It was a bad investment. He ought to speak up for having it been a bad investment. And at the same time, I'd like to hold the mayor accountable on two of his claims, and they will be unrelated, but as it relates to the ban on assault weapons, as well as it relates to what he's done on the minimum wage, it's important to get the record straight.
Mr. King, 30 seconds.
Sure. You know, I have a greater concern. Shouldn't have given money to Marco Rubio, but I got a greater concern. You know, he talks a lot about his record. But that's also a record where there are a lot of things that I think the folks in this audience wouldn't like. The fact that if you disagreed with Mayor Levine in Miami Beach, life was not very good to you. It's a record of attacking journalists when he didn't like what they wrote, of silencing scientists when he didn't like their findings, of belittling public constituents in public, of blocking community leaders when they responded to questions to him on Twitter. You know, we've had leaders that talk about fake news. We've had leaders that bully constituents.
I
think we need a different kind of
you want to respond?
I'm so happy to respond, but the one thing I can say is, boy, it's sure fun to be the front runner. I'll tell you that. So I take it as a compliment going forward. But let me say this. You know, I stand on my record. The fact of the matter is we raised the minimum living wage. The fact of the matter is we did some great things for people that I think you could say was very progressive. Now, when I look back and say to myself, would I like to take that check back from Marco Rubio? 100% absolutely. I would like to take that check back. But I also know that I have donated and contributed and raised significant sums for the Democratic Party, and I'm proud to be a Democrat.
Very quickly, Gwen Graham.
The negative narrative of the men that's being created on this stage, I will tell you, as Michelle Obama said, when they go low, I'm always going to choose to go high. I'm always going to choose to go high.
Go ahead, Mr. King.
Let me try. Congresswoman, this is not about being negative. When it comes to Syria, this is about standing up for voices that don't have power to stand up for themselves. You know? When it comes to Mayor Levine and the way he conducted and comported himself in Miami Beach, these are things Adam Putnam or Ron DeSantis are going to be talking about. They're not going to be playing softball with the Democrats. That's why they've beaten us so many times. We need to elect a Democrat who is strong but also kind and who has a record that is beyond reproach.
Can I? But you know,
I'll get to both of you, but Mr. Levine, you go ahead first.
Once again, I find it interesting that people talk about things they've never done, and they promise things in the future. As the mayor of Miami Beach, we did many things, from reforming a police department, from raising the minimum wage, to fighting back sea level rise, to decriminalizing marijuana, to banning assault rifles, even though unfortunately it was not enforceable, to doing everything that a progressive mayor would do. So when people say, what are you going to do in the future? I say, take a look at what we've done. And that's what we'll do and more in building a 21st century economy. And in retrospect, let me say what Republicans like. Republicans do not want somebody that actually has built a business and lived the American dream. I have done that and been a successful two-term mayor.
I have to
Thank
say,
you.
and on point to the issues that the mayor makes claim of, they passed a resolution to ban assault rifles, which was not enforceable and never enforced. He passed a resolution to raise the minimum wage, which actually no one got the benefit of because it was not enforced. Now, I will tell you, when I was sued by the NRA and drugged through court, we had mayors all across the state join, submit amicus brief, stood behind me and next to me in court to make sure that we could beat back that preemption. Mayor Levine was missing. He didn't show up until after this became an issue that was popular for the public to discuss, and then he showed up on the stage and said that I'm for reforms as it relates to guns.
Can I please respond
His
to that?
record is not consistent with his rhetoric.
First of all, Andrew, the bottom line is this, okay? In 2004, the people of Florida voted that the local municipality should have the right to enforce and set their own minimum wage. That's what we did. Unfortunately, we got sued by the governor, the state of Florida, the Retail Federation. We are fighting it in court, and we believe it's going to go to the Florida Supreme Court, and we're going to win. The fact of the matter is, we did it. So I asked my friends to the right and to the left, have you not? Why didn't you pass a minimum wage?
Everyone.
Ms. Graham, please wrap up this section.
I appreciate the opportunity to end the negative narrative because this election is too important. We have got to elect a Democrat in November of 2018, and that's why I'm going to be that Democrat, because we've got to end the chaos, we've got to end the negativity, we've got to end the attacks and start talking about what are we going to do for the people of Florida. That's my commitment and my commitment to the students. Action, not words.
And that brings us to our next topic, which...
I know that we allowed a little bit of back and forth on this, and I just have to say, being accountable for our records is exactly what the voters are entitled to. How did we vote? What did we do? Where are we going to stand? Because they deserve, one of us may be the next governor of the state of Florida. It matters whether or not you voted against President Obama 52% of the time. It matters if you voted for Keystone Pipeline. It matters whether or not we said we did what we didn't do, right? Because that says what we're going to be if we get elected to serve as governor.
It definitely matters to say that you did what you didn't do. I agree with that, 100%.
He's talking about your record, Ms. Graham, so please respond.
I am always happy to talk about my record, and I have talked about it over and over again. I would ask Mayor Gillum to talk about his record. I give him the remaining part of my time. Mayor Gillum supported a $300 million coal power plant in North Florida. I never have thought that coal power was the way to go. It's the reason why carbon emissions is the #1 threat to our rising sea levels, and we have got to have an opportunity to hear about Mayor Gillum's record on the coal power plant that he voted for over and over and over, supported, which would have been horrible for the environment in Florida.
I should absolutely answer for that, and I wish the Congresswoman would have followed the research all the way through, which is because I voted ultimately against that power plant, and today, the same week that Donald Trump passed, pulled out of the Paris Accord, we broke ground on a 120-acre solar farm in my community, tripling the amount of solar energy that we produce. We also, under my leadership as mayor, have made a commitment to disarm ourselves from any non-renewable energy by 2040. That's the commitment that I've made as mayor, and that's the track that we are on under my leadership now in its 4th year.
Mayor Gillum, you did not answer the question. Why did you vote over and over again for a coal power plant in North Florida?
Congresswoman, I'm sorry you missed my answer, which was to simply say
I did not miss it. I just did not hear the answer.
Which is to simply say that coal-fired plant never got built thanks to me and my colleagues who ultimately opposed it. And what happened in the end is that we built a 120-acre solar farm, and we made a commitment to withdraw from any non-renewable energy by 2040. That's our commitment.
Again,
let's move on.
As my record has been one that we've discussed a lot, I would just have appreciated if Mayor Gillum had actually answered the question.
Thank you.
We have to move on from here. On to the next topic now, which is hurricane season, and this will be a minute to you to answer, Ms. Graham. Hurricane season, here we are once again. It is now just upon us, but some are still recuperating from our last go-around with Hurricane Irma. There's still people out there with help being offered and taking them up on that offer. What would you have done differently if you had been in Rick Scott's shoes during the time of Irma, before and after the storm? What was not done right? What would you have done differently?
Well, thank you for the question, because it is the governor's responsibility to plan for the future of Florida. Planning for that hurricane that's going to hit our state should be at the top of your agenda. They were clearly not prepared for what Hurricane Irma brought. We must have had plans in place to take care of those who are going to have to evacuate. There was not enough shelters across the state of Florida. We were not able to reverse the roads in the state of Florida so that people could move north when they needed to evacuate. And we needed to make sure that there was a way to bring gasoline into the state of Florida so that those gas stations could be refueled so that people could actually get north what they needed to do. My husband and I actually opened a Red Cross shelter in Tallahassee. At the height of the storm, we had 700 Floridians from all over the state of Florida sleeping on the floor of a high school in Tallahassee. When I'm governor, the plans are going to be put in place, and clearly the governor giving out his personal cell phone number to the owners of nursing homes and then not answering the phone, 14 Floridians died in Hollywood as a result of his action.
Thank you.
Mr. King, go ahead.
If I could just say, for the last 12 years, my work has been in senior housing, creating safe, clean, and affordable housing for seniors. And I take the responsibility of creating a safe environment very, very carefully. The biggest problem we had in the preparation to Irma and what we still face today in Florida is the fact that the Hollywood Hills tragedy could happen again this year. Because the law, while they changed the law, there were a number of exemptions, and so most of the facilities in Pinellas, in Hillsborough, in Central Florida where I live, that are assisted living and nursing homes still don't have backup power. So if we get hit by a powerful storm, the seniors of this state are vulnerable. I think that's wrong.
Thank you.
Let's switch gears now and talk about Puerto Rico. So many people from Puerto Rico who have moved here are struggling to get back on their feet. We know that Governor Rick Scott has taken a lot of steps to help these people. So our question now is, how do you plan to continue those efforts to help the many people that are here on the main island? Mr. Levine, we'd like you to answer that.
Thank you. As a mayor that actually went through Hurricane Irma and had to do what we did and evacuate an entire city and keep people safe, I speak firsthand. When Maria hit Puerto Rico, I was the first private individual to bring in relief in an aircraft on the tarmac. Matter of fact, the White House called me up during a press conference, and they said, the mayor has no idea what he's doing, but we did it. The fact of the matter is the response from our country was an embarrassment. It was a national embarrassment. If we had done the same thing in Normandy, we would never have landed on those shores. If we had done the same thing with the Berlin airlift, Berlin would have been part of the Soviet Union. As governor, we need to make sure that they have services, that their licenses transfer here so they can live.
All right, let's go down the line. We'll give this to everybody here. President Trump, I don't think he's got a lot of fans in this audience, but starting with Mr. King, tell us what he's done right.
What he's done right.
Correct. You have 10 minutes.
He's given me 10 minutes to answer the question. You know, Adam, there's not much he's given us to work with to suggest that he's done much right. I'll tell you what he did to be successful. And I think what the Democrats in 2018 have to do, but for good. And that's the fact that he tapped in to the anxiety across this state for so many people who have not seen the Democratic Party talk about pocketbook issues. The Democrats to win have to have an economic vision, and that's why I'm running to fix.
Graham.
What he's done right is this audience. He has energized Floridians everywhere I go. This is the type of engagement and excitement that we feel, and we're going to take back Florida in 2018 because Donald Trump, we have got to have a force against Donald Trump, and in 2020, we're going to be the state, Florida's going to be the state that sends him back to New York City.
Mr. Gillum.
Well, I think all of us can agree that Donald Trump is uniquely unqualified for the job that he holds, and is a danger to himself and the rest of the civilized world. But the best thing that he's ever done, so far as I can imagine, and so far as I've been able to observe, is when he takes a hiatus from Twitter. I think he was off for a...
Does he ever? I haven't seen
Quickly,
a hiatus
Mr. Levine.
ever.
Thank you. I spent over a year and a half of my life saying why this person should not be president. Unfortunately, he is our president today. The bottom line is, I think what Gwen has said, he's unified us. He's unified the Democratic Party. He put out an infrastructure plan. The good part was he says he wants to compress the time it takes for us to actually get these public projects done. The bad part was he didn't put any funding with it. So bottom line is he's a tragedy for a nation. We're living a national nightmare.
This hour was going to go by very quickly, and it has. And we have come to that point now where we are getting ready to begin our closing remarks. Very fast hour, good debate. Thank you for that. But let's move on now and start those closing remarks. We'll begin in the same order as we started, and 1 minute to each of you. So please go ahead, Mr. Gillum, with your closing.
Well, simply thank you for the conversation, and I'm so thankful to the sponsors of this event. And I want to particularly call out the Women's March, because I couldn't stop watching cartoons for several weeks after the election, and certainly had to medicate my way through Inauguration Day with gummy bears. And then 2 days later, looked up and saw a sea of women all over this country standing up and reminding us of who we are as a nation, who we are as a country. And now we have the opportunity, Floridians, to flip this state blue this year. And I want you to know that it's my firm belief that we're not going to get there by running Republican light. We're going to get there by standing for what we believe, giving voters a reason to go out and vote for something and not just against something. With your help, my name is Andrew Gillum, and I hope that you will help me not only become the Democratic nominee, but the next great governor of the great state of Florida. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We must move on. We must move on. Mr. King, please begin your closing.
Florida needs change, and the change we need is bigger than just replacing one Republican with one Democrat. We don't simply need to win, we need to be transformative. You know, conventional politics tells you don't go after big sugar. I did. Conventional politics says in Florida we cower to the NRA. I proposed an assault weapons ban and a bullet tax. Conventional politics doesn't say anything about affordable housing. I've made it a cornerstone of my campaign. For 11 days in May, I traveled this state rolling out an ambitious criminal justice plan that would reduce mass incarceration for nonviolent offenders by 50%, end the death penalty in private prisons, legalize marijuana, and dismantle the school-to-prison pipeline. If you want the status quo, I'm not your guy. If you want to swing for the fences and dream again, I'm Chris King, and I want to be your governor. Thank you.
And now, Mr. Levine, your closing remarks, 1 minute.
Thank you for everybody here today. And I've said this and I'll say it before. I hope every single one of you vote for me. But I know one thing. If any of the 4 of us become governor, our state will be in way better shape than it is today going forward. I'm running for governor for everyone to live the American dream. I started with $500. I built a business. I believe the formula is our country is the American dream. I'm running to level the playing field so everyone has the opportunity. President Kennedy said, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. I say this to all people running for office. Forget about saying what it is you're going to do. Take a look at people's backgrounds, see what they've done, and make sure that they have accomplished the things that you would like to see happen in the state of Florida. I want to create a 21st century economy in the state of Florida. And together, I believe all of us will do it, so we all have a greater future together. Thank you for the opportunity.
And finally, Gwen Graham, please do your
Boy,
closing.
has this hour gone fast. And all of the things we've talked about during this last hour is why it is so important we elect a Democrat in November of 2018. Irma, the impact of Irma, the influx of wonderful new Floridians from the island of Puerto Rico, the attack on our immigration, the attack on our health care. All of these issues have happened in the last year. We have got to elect a Democrat. I am the only Democrat on this stage that has had a tough election. I won in 2014. I was one of only 2 Democrats in the entire country to beat a sitting Republican incumbent. It is that race that made me battle-tested and ready to take on all that the Republicans are going to throw at us from August 29th on. Together, we will win this race because we don't have any other options. For the students in this audience, it is our responsibility to win in November so that we can provide a bright future for them and a safe future for them. And I thank you all
We've reached the end of the debate, so let's give all these guys a big round of applause.
Thank you so much. We want to thank our partners as well, Indivisible Florida 13, Fired Up Pinellas, Women's March Florida, for making this debate possible. Thank you.
And don't forget, everyone, primary day is Tuesday, August 28th. You can count on Spectrum News for complete coverage of that election night. So from all of us here, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you to the candidates. Good night.